everybody, this is Jen Kleinhens.
And I'm Rob Vose.
And you're listening to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, a podcast where we talk about our thoughts and opinions on marketing, from customer experience to brand and everything in between. Join us today as we talk about what makes the Netflix experience great.
So you want to talk about Netflix. Seemed like a really relevant brand. Has been even more relevant this year, given that no one can leave their houses at various times of the of the year. And I would love to see, probably should do some digging on this, usage stats of what has happened this year to Netflix and many of the other streaming platforms, because they're on an upward trajectory anyway. I imagine they've been given a turbocharge. So yeah, I want to talk about a few things from experience perspective, behavioural science perspective, data science perspective that makes Netflix great. Just a bit of a thing up front though. If Netflix didn't have decent content, none of this would matter. None of what we're about to talk about would make any difference whatsoever. So there's a whole separate conversation to be had by probably people who aren't in marketing experience talking about the content and some of the great...
Oh, I have things to say about the content.
Well, I know, but like some in terms of the way they commission content and create content and all that kind of stuff.
I still have things to say about that.
Which I think is astonishing. They've done some amazing things. Some amazing series, some amazing cultural moments have come through Netflix. Netflix as a brand, the idea of is coming into our sort of lexicon of it's almost like a default for sitting and watching streaming, content these days, isn't it?
I remember when it was friggin' DVDs.
Yeah.
And then they started doing the streaming thing, and I was like, this is cool, but they only had like a few things.
Buffering. But if you look at them now, the powerhouse they've become, and the brands they work with, from the Marvels and all that kind of stuff, and the content they have is pretty astonishing.
I mean, 15% of the world's web traffic goes to Netflix at any given time, and it's I've seen stats that say it's as much as a third of the world's web traffic, like after 9 p.m. Yeah,
I don't know if there are any stats anywhere on the market share of streaming platforms. I doubt there is. I doubt there's a standardized...
Yeah, this is the difficulty, because you don't have something like a Nielsen rating system, and part of what makes like Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney Plus, all these really powerful is the data, and they don't want to give away their data. So actually I found, because we'll link to it in the show notes, but I've written a few articles now about Netflix, and it's difficult because you get proxies for things, you can kind of guesstimate. But as far as I could tell, there wasn't really like a one-stop shop for, Netflix has 50% of the
has
market
as many
share.
Users. Because you want to do share by users, share by...
and many people have
minutes.
more than one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So,
and anyway, we're going off track here. But
Yeah.
I think the key point here is that the content and the content creation process and all those kind of things is a separate thing from this conversation. We're going to mainly talk about how the content is presented, how people find the content, and why the ways in which Netflix do that work.
Yeah, I mean, because I think, to be fair, like it is a streaming service, but really it's a content, sort of a curation platform.
Yeah, and I think curation's a key word, and I think when we start to get into the data science bit of it, it isn't just a black box. They do some really smart stuff when it comes to data science stuff. But I know, Jen, you kind of come up with some behavioural science principles that you wanted to kind of talk through. So let's kind of do that, and I'll chip in as we go. So where did you want to start with Netflix?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing, like as you were saying about curation, about Netflix, is they are very conscious of the fact that personalization is basically what they exist to do. So Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix, has an interesting quote. So he said, "If the Starbucks secret is a smile when you get your latte, Netflix's secret is that the website adapts to the individual's tastes." So I think they get that this is like a point of differentiation for them. And I think they really get that if they do it wrong, there's ramifications. And if they get it right, it can really be positive. I think one of the really interesting things, just again, we're kind of laying a base here a little bit, but as a culture, they're very experiment driven. I think no surprise, they're very data driven. But I think I was shocked when I was doing research on this to what level they're doing things. So like multivariate testing with thumbnails, for instance, I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
So
they personalize thumbnails?
Yes, they can personalize thumbnails based on your location, where you are. And I think, sorry, just to back it up a little bit. So the behavioral science mechanic behind this, it's one of a few. Around personalization is something called the cocktail party effect. And And basically it's this idea that your brain will filter out information that's not relevant to you. So if I get on Netflix and I scroll through a bunch of movies that I don't care about, that aren't really for me, that aren't to my taste, it feels like it's an experience that has a lot of content, but not a lot of content for me. Yeah. And I think it's that key bit that gets people interested and kind of keeps them watching on Netflix.
And it's called the cocktail party effect, to be clear, because the idea is essentially if you were because we all go to cocktail parties all the time these days, but if you're at a cocktail party, all the conversations around you are just background noise.
It's like
yeah. It's the teacher from Peanuts, what it was.
From the Peanuts, yes.
And if you hear your name, all of a sudden your brain picks that up.
Yeah, basically your brain will filter out information that's relevant to you, that it has deemed to be relevant to you. And it's basically analogous to, digital environments. And in fact, Accenture did a lot of research around personalization, and they found that 56% of customers would rather buy from a retailer that recognizes them by name. 65% of them would prefer to buy from a retailer who knows their purchase history. And 58% of customers would prefer to buy from a retailer that recommends options based on their past purchases. All three of those things sound a lot like Netflix.
Well, I've got some killer stats for you as well. Ooh, okay. In this stat off. The recommendations, apparently, I don't know how they've calculated this, so you have to take this with a pinch of salt, produces $1 billion a year in terms of customer retention.
That's interesting. I wonder how they came up with that number.
And something like 80% of Netflix's views come from recommendations being put in front of people. I found a phenomenal article by a guy called David Chong, who wrote it on Medium. He's part of the Towards Data Science group on Medium. And he explains in some detail, but not overly stretching detail, thank you, David, how Netflix's recommender system works and the different layers of it, and why things like why it's in rows. So the idea is because it's in a row, if you sit and stop and scroll through a row, you're interested. If you scroll straight past it, you're not. So they can even use things like that. So there's some really simple things like category level stuff. You've watched X category, therefore you might be interested in this category. There's stuff around the trending. So the short-term trend stuff you would think is just stuff that's new, but it's not. They also apply filters on top of that in terms of, is it a seasonal thing? So we'll get a whole bunch of Christmas stuff, I'm sure. But also global events like coronavirus and elections and all that sort of stuff. They do things like the continue watching bit. Again, is still personalised based on the probability of members to continue watching those things. Like, when was the last time you watched it? What point did you abandon it? What device were you watching it on? Like, the level of detail is astonishing. Like video to video ranker, which is quite interesting. So collaborative filtering, which is kind of there's two forms, and I'm sorry, any data scientists who are about to listen to this. There's two forms. There's person-based collaborative filtering and product-based collaborative filtering. So person-based collaborative filtering. Okay. So what it basically says is one would say, people like you also like this. And that's great. But it's hugely data intensive because they've got to understand you as a customer,
and they have to find other.
And there's going to be a whole bunch of data that sits behind that, all that kind of stuff. But there's also product-based collaborative filtering, which is these are similar products to the one that you have bought or are interested in, which obviously is a lot less data intensive in terms of understanding the customer's behaviour. So they use both of those things, and then the bit that I find fascinating on top of that, there's a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But the bit that I find fascinating, and I'm always really sketchy about recommendation engines because they're black boxes, and I want to know, and there is research to show that people want to see the cause and effect. They want to know where that recommendation came from, especially in a complex system like a recommendation engine. But they have something where they have to show sort of evidence to support why this is being put in front of somebody. So that's where that recommendations, the star or percentage ranking comes from, and they use that, and they use a whole bunch of stuff to kind of show, and even the names of the categories, because you watched this, because you did that, because you did the other. It's so important that they do that, and that's the bit that I like about it. And then the last thing I'll say is that recommendation engines are great, and I think a lot of the algorithms in our social networks fall foul of this, which is they present stuff that we think you want to watch, which is absolutely what they should do. But Netflix also adds in stretch. It also says, this might be a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but because they know the more categories you're interested in, the more the better it is for them.
Well, interestingly, now they have a shuffle feature as well. Like, it says, like, you can't figure out what to watch, just then hit the shuffle and we'll just give you something random.
And I would assume that that shuffle is personalized as well.
I mean, I don't know, because honestly, like, I think with a lot of the recent sort of controversy around, like, living in a bubble, like the Facebook bubble or whatever, I kind of wonder if that's their solution for that.
Maybe.
Is hey, let's just shake it up and show you maybe, like, what's popular across Netflix globally. Yeah. Like, what do we think, you might like that you haven't seen before?
I think a lot of the things about recommendation engines I don't like, Netflix solved and have done fantastically well. Yeah. Same as, much as I'm not a huge fan of Amazon, same with Amazon with their stuff. There's occasionally you'll get some stuff with Amazon, you're like, what? But again, there's clarity. You can see how they got from A to B.
Yeah. I'm interested to see too, because I wonder if Netflix on any level, like, sells the data that they have about people. So, like, in the US they use a thing called a Q score. So, like, a celebrity has a Q score. It's kind of like we watched the movie Long Shot, and they were and Charlize Theron was supposed to be figuring out if she was going to run for president. And they were talking about her Q score. Oh, you're really likable. Oh, people really know who you are, but you have a weird laugh, so your Q score suffers. That kind of thing. So I wonder if Netflix is going to, like, Tom Cruise's agent or something and saying, like, hey, we've got this platform to help you figure out like, how likable, how well known, how familiar are people with Tom Cruise, or
quite possibly. I think the other thing it helps them obviously do is commission.
Yeah.
What are we missing? What do we need? We don't have enough. It's interesting. Romantic comedies. We don't have enough this and that and the other.
I mean, there is still some level of, like, human creativity there. So if you want to talk about creativity and machines a little bit, I do think that their data does help them figure out, like, what do they feel like is going to be successful in terms of commissioned content. But there's still a secret sauce to it. I mean, if people watch The Crown, and then somebody, creates, I don't know, okay, people like historical British dramas. So let's make a drama about Winston Churchill. Yeah. Well, if it's a crap TV show or it doesn't quite hit the same... maybe people are interested in, like, female historical figures, but it's like, would you know that from looking at the data, or is it a little bit of, like, we have a hypothesis and we'll commission something to test it?
And possibly, but I also think what you've hit upon there is that what I think is a ridiculous debate about creativity versus data, which I think is absurd. Because
I think it's a lot of creative people that don't want to learn how to use data.
I think
and
that's
be
probably
creative
fair.
with it.
But I also think that they misunderstand what data is for, and they also look at things like stuff that, like, I hate, like programmatic display advertising and stuff, like, which is all data driven and templated and all that sort of stuff. My argument would be that data and insight finds and shapes the problem, creates the guidelines within which you then let creative people go play. So what we do using data and insight is to, and that's what planners do, I guess, is to kind of go, okay, based on the data, based on what we know, based on what people are doing, what they're saying, this is our insight. This is the problem we need to solve. This is the creative once said to me, the scariest thing as a creative is a blank piece of paper. It's terrifying. Like, I don't know where to start. So to me, what data does is it provides a framework within which a creative can then go play.
I think too many people don't understand data and are afraid of it, so they don't let it do what you're describing. Yes. They don't let it draw a framework in which to be creative. Instead, they go do whatever they want to do, and then they cherry pick a bunch of data and they pretend that they're being data driven, which is one of my pet peeves, to be honest with you. I don't feel like it's an ethical use of data, if you want my honest opinion.
No, you shouldn't. I mean, we talked about this when Mark Razzle was on the podcast about, you shouldn't be looking to prove yourself right. You should be looking to prove yourself wrong.
Yeah. Ideally.
Anyway, we've kind of gone off on a bit of a tangent there.
Yes, we have.
But anyway, so personalization is the thing that drives them, and from a data science perspective, they are doing some phenomenal stuff. I will link to that article because it's very, very good.
Yeah, so I think if we want to talk about a few other sort of behavioral science things about their experience that I think are really interesting, is this idea of idleness aversion. So there's a principle called idleness aversion, and basically it says that people are happier when they're busy, even if they're forced to be busy. So I think, like, a good analogy or good story for this is the story of the elevator and the wait time. So it's been referenced in a bunch of places. I don't know who actually did the study.
Sounds like a Roald Dahl book.
Yes, the elevator and the wait time.
The elevator and the wait
Well, basically, they have one of these big. If you've ever worked in one of these big, giant like buildings with like sorting elevators and the whole thing, you can wait a long time for an elevator. I mean, you can be down there for 5 or 6 minutes. And this was the case in a particular building in New York, and people were getting really antsy because that's a long time to wait for an elevator, especially if you're late for a meeting or something. Yeah. And what they found was, to solve this problem, they didn't actually have to make the elevators any faster. They just had to put a mirror on the front of the elevator doors. So while you're waiting, you were looking at yourself, and all of a sudden, you were very entertained for those 5 or 6 minutes, and it didn't seem like such a long wait.
Was this pre-mobile phones as well?
Oh, maybe. I would assume, yes.
But it's an interesting thing, yes, that you can be just that easily distracted. But.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, how Netflix is applying idleness aversion, and I would say sometimes to their detriment and sometimes to their benefit, would be things like auto-playing trailers. Mm-hmm. So this is something that they've actually given you the option now to turn off. But for a long time, Netflix defaulted to, I'd hover over something and it would just start the sound, the whole trailer for whatever show this was. And you only had to be on it for just one little second.
Yeah.
And I would say that was, it's really a pet peeve for a lot of people. Now, they test a lot. They're very data-driven, very experiment-driven. So I have no doubt that for a long time, people were telling them they were irritated, but behaving in such a way that they were achieving a goal or doing something that Netflix wanted them to do. Probably watching stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that eventually they just listened to people complain enough about it, and it actually became a meme. So there's a tweet that I thought was really funny, where somebody says, so Netflix says, "Should I play this movie?" Me, no, I'm just looking at it for a second. Netflix, I'll put it on. Me, I'm literally just reading what it is. Netflix, it's playing.
Yeah.
So that was basically everyone's experience, and I think they eventually were like, we can't keep doing this. This is terrible.
Yeah.
But now, it's again not something that they really do, but sometimes they'll play just like a little bit of motion on something. They'll change something a little bit. So basically, again, you've got this sometimes really long period between the intention of putting on Netflix and actually deciding, or sometimes you never even get to decide. You're just like, I just want to see what's on.
Yeah. The thing that's smart, though, is that they also, though, do, because as I understand it, I was reading about what they optimize against, and optimizing against hours or minutes watched is obviously what they're trying to, that's one of their core metrics. And the autoplay at the end of an episode,
The defaults.
Yeah, because you will just sit there. Mm-hmm. I remember back in when Daredevil first came out, I basically watched that in a day in Australia over the weekend. I was
Well, interestingly, I think they found a balance between asking if that was the right metric, because it used to be that you would watch Netflix and it would just infinite default play the next thing. You could sit there for 8 hours and it would just default play the next episode. And then eventually they got to the point where you watch like 3 or 4 episodes and they say, "Are you still watching this?"
Yes.
Because I think their cost obviously has a lot to do with like servers and if you are just sitting there and you leave the TV on, I used to do that all the time. I would clean the house and I would put on like Parks and Rec or The Office or whatever and just let it roll and not really be paying attention to it. And I think from their perspective, you as a customer weren't getting the value out of Netflix, but they were still having to pay the cost.
Yeah.
And I think that's why
it's a good compromise between the two.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So that's idleness aversion. What else was...
And defaults, actually.
We defaults. Yeah, we talked defaults too. It's funny because defaults, when you talk about behavioural science, to me, defaults are like one of the most, if not the most powerful in terms of that level of inertia and that we just find default. Yeah. Anyway, what was the next one?
So just one more. Reciprocity is an interesting one. So reciprocity is one of Robert Cialdini's principles of influence. And yes, it is Cialdini. I looked it up.
Talked about he's been on this podcast a few times in
not
name
himself.
And in spirit. Yes.
In spirit. So basically, reciprocity is a social norm of responding to positive action with another positive action. So it's like when someone does you a favor, you feel indebted, regardless of if you hate them, you still feel indebted to them. You still feel like, oh, this person did me a favor, so I should do something for them. So reciprocity is a really interesting one for Netflix. Because actually they went out and did some research and they asked people, quote, what's the one thing you would like to know more about before signing up for Netflix? And the most popular answer was knowing all of the movies and TV shows available. Now, interestingly, they took this response to a survey and they said, okay, well, why don't we just like show you all the content? Why don't we just, flick around and we'll try some things. We'll show you the complete catalog. So actually this ended up being a failed experiment. So maybe a good example of applying an insight, but as a hypothesis, not saying, well, 46% of people said they wanted to see everything. So, because they said that, it must be true. They tested it with behavior, which is the key bit if you want to apply behavioral science or anything or data, really, is you've got to experiment because people lie. They don't even know they're lying. They lie.
Research is a hypothesis to be tested,
totally.
Not a fact. Yeah.
So they redid the whole thing. They showed you could, do your search and you could see everything. And they actually found that it was a failure in the grand scheme of things. And their winning experiment was basically giving customers just a sneak peek of the content. So if you look, I'm going to try to describe an image on a podcast, which is never fun. Basically, instead of being able to scroll through every single bit of content before you sign up, it's just a quick like a image of really popular content. And then it says, see what's next, watch anywhere, cancel anytime, join free for a month. So actually they found that there were different levers. So joining free for a month, that's an example of reciprocity. So instead of just kind of saying like, here's everything, do you want to sign up? They were saying like, hey, you can join and see everything. And here's a sneak peek. And we'll give you a free month to do whatever you want. So you can actually, instead of clicking on the content and being disappointed by the fact that you can't watch it, okay, all of a sudden now you can go through everything. And we know because of the default effect, which we talked about earlier, most people will not cancel their subscription.
Yeah, it's an auto-renew. It's interesting that we've talked about choice overload in the past. And we talked about the idea that loads and loads of choices creates interest, but it doesn't create conversion.
Yes.
So there's probably an element of that sitting in there as well, which is they know that people will go, oh, wow, that's a lot. And then maybe one of the reasons they're looking at all this stuff is not converted. It's like, oh my God, that's so much stuff.
Yeah.
By doing that, and then obviously they solve what's called the cold start problem from a personalization perspective by asking people questions about the stuff they're interested in. So once they get into that, then they can curate and they can limit their selection. So they're kind of that choice overload effect. They're kind of skating over, which I thought was quite interesting.
I think it's an interesting one to that point. Is like you're gonna see if you can go through all the content. Like Netflix's USP is also their like Achilles heel. Do you know what I mean? Like when you have all the content in the world. It's the Amazon issue, right? Like you can buy anything that there is. People don't want to. They think they do. They want to browse. They want to look around. They're like, oh, let me look at every blouse. Let me at 5,000 blouses. Yeah. But when it comes down to it, to your point, like people just will not make a decision if they've got too many options. And they have to be able to say like, okay, based on what I'm seeing, based on, for instance, like the top 10 is a great way that they curate basically like what everybody's seeing. So it's like a social proof bit. Okay, well, it's the top 10. I've narrowed it down. I can choose between 10 things. Because I can tell you off the bat, I don't want 5 of them. 3 of them I've already seen, and 2 of them look interesting. So let me choose between those 2. Human beings really need information to be chunked down for them to be able to compare and make a decision.
Yeah, I just think Netflix is a great example of a brand that does things right in the sense of they experiment, they use research as creating a hypothesis to be tested, they mix behavioural and data science together brilliantly. They've realised that content and the exploration and curation of content is what they do. So they've invested obviously heavily from a content perspective, but they clearly have invested a huge amount into machine learning, data scientists, that kind of stuff as well. And they are just an extraordinary group when it comes to that kind of stuff. I don't know anybody who's doing this as, Amazon. Yeah. But there's not many people who do it like this. And I think they do a phenomenal job.
So that's it for this episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand. We hope you enjoyed it. You can find show notes, resources, and more episodes on our website, everybodyhatesyourbrand.com. But before we go, let's leave on a positive note and let's share what we're loving right now. So, Rob, what you got this week?
Well, as you know, as a Rit tonight, he posted something on his LinkedIn page, which is a video, basically 17 slides that every marketer needs to know about television. And he did this thing. It's on a Swedish. It looks like a TV show. I don't think it is a TV show, but it's very professional. And he actually speaks Swedish at the beginning. I didn't even know he spoke Swedish. But it's not all in Swedish, so you don't have to speak the language. But it's a really interesting look at TV and why people who say TV is dying don't necessarily know what they're talking about, and lots of good, powerful stats to back that up. You have to consider the source in some of these things, but I do think it's a really interesting look at the role of TV in everyone's lives, not just people say young people aren't watching TV as much. That's true, but it's also where they see most video advertising, for example. He did some stats around that kind of stuff. Some really interesting stuff. It's about a 45-minute long video, and we'll post in the show notes. It's definitely worth a watch. Okay. What did you have, Jennifer?
So I had a happy ending to a story of missteps. Let's put it that way. So Sherwin-Williams, you may or may not know, I think they're in the UK as well, but they're an American paint company. So you go into Sherwin-Williams and they mix paints or whatever. And they had somebody who had been working for them for about 3 years. He was in college and he was just kind of working at Sherwin-Williams for 3 years, which is not an insignificant amount of time. And the story goes that on his sort of moments of his spare time, he was using his employee discount to buy cans of paint, and this is very popular on TikTok, to like put in different things of paint, like different dyes in the paint, and like stir it around and have people guess what color is going to come out.
In some cases, he didn't even know himself, did he? He was like playing around with himself.
No, he was just trying things. So he garnered 1.4 million followers. Okay, let me say that again: 1.4 million. Now, to put that into perspective, I went on Sherwin-Williams' Instagram, their Facebook, and their LinkedIn. No. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and combined them, and there was only 900,000 followers.
Right.
So he has created a TikTok all around Sherwin-Williams paints and has gotten more followers than their entire social media team and agency combined. So that's pretty impressive. Yeah. Like, give it to this kid, like high five.
You would think they would give him a big high five.
You would think that they would, I don't know, be partnering with him or think of a very smart way to figure it out. Instead, what happened is he got a knock on his door from HR. And HR said, we believe that you've been doing this on company time. We believe that customers may have suffered. Now, this is he said, she said, because who knows what was actually going on. If people saw him making TikToks while he was mixing their paint, like it all gets really fuzzy. And, it's doing things on company time for your own personal benefit is always a no-no. But instead of giving him a slap on the wrist and saying like, hey, listen, let's find a way to work together because obviously you've created something of value, they fired him. Which I think many people facepalmed at that. But there is a happy ending to this story.
I'd heard that initial bit. I didn't hear there was a happy ending.
So his name is Tony Pilasano, Piloseno. I apologize to Tony. But he apparently received offers from nearly every major paint company. But he decided to work for a smaller competitor in Florida. So basically, Sherwin-Williams has shot himself in the foot slightly. So now he's taken his 1.4 million people, who probably all hate Sherwin-Williams now.
More than likely.
Let's be real. And he has taken them and he's going to work with them to develop his own line of paint.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. What a great story. I mean, he was a college student. He was like part-time at Sherwin-Williams. And like, look, I get we're living in a new world. So you can't really blame Sherwin-Williams. But I think most people on the face of it would say, maybe that wasn't a great decision, but you know what? Competitors, other people saw it as an opportunity, and they took advantage of it, and now they've got an audience of over 1 million people.
I mean, that screams to me that Sherwin-Williams are just extraordinarily old-fashioned, maybe, or extraordinarily conservative in their thinking, or something.
Don't
but
know
anyway,
what
who knows?
But, I mean, look, it's hard to blame a company like that, because I do think he was really toeing the line in terms of creating content on company time.
But he did say that a lot of stuff he bought himself and he was doing it. So what?
I can see it in both ways.
If you've got a queue of customers
a dangerous precedent,
and you're mixing paint for TikTok, fair enough.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that was the case. So just think, it's like when, it's like it's just hugely short-sighted.
Yeah, anyway. I think it's debatable because you can see it from Sherwin-Williams' point of view as well. To say like, oh, okay, yeah, like maybe he's distracting from serving customers and all that. But I think really most people would side with Tony, and they would say like, listen, Sherwin-Williams, like he has a lot of. I mean, they could have more than doubled their social following if, for instance, they had said, oh my God, like maybe you come work on our social team or get hired by the agency or anything.
Absolutely.
But they did not extend that olive branch. They instead took a pretty hard line. But again, like it's a happy ending. So, good for him. Well, you did it. You've wasted another perfectly good half an hour or so with Rob and Jen and the Everybody Hates Your Brand podcast. Again, you can find us on everybodyhatesyourbrand.com and your podcast platform of choice. Have a week.
Take great care and be vigilant.